It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? It's football season. Take Command podcast with Logan Paulsen there. I am Craig Hoffman, and buddy, it's week one.
Yeah, man, it's incredibly exciting. I mean, it feels like we've been talking about this team and all the exciting changes. We have a lot of stuff like news to talk about, but now we actually get to talk about football, which is always enjoyable. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what this team looks like versus a pretty good Tampa Bay team. So it's kind of a good week one test.
Yeah, I'll say an intriguing Tampa Bay team. They are definitely a team that I think could be good. They obviously won a playoff game against the free-falling Eagles last year, but can they repeat it this year? They lose Dave Canales, their OC. There's been a bit of a quarterback whisper to Carolina as their head coach. So we'll get into, of course, the preview later on in the week. But more generically, Logan, week one, we talk about this. Now, this is our third year doing a week one pod, I think.
Yeah.
Third year? Fourth year? Third year?
We're consistent, so.
Yeah. But in case you're new to the show, you're going to get it all over again. And if you're not new to the show, here's a reminder. Week one's weird. And as a player and as a coach, it's a bit of a nightmare to prepare for. And that actually might work in the Commanders' favor this year, Logan. What was your process going into week one? And if you were, say, a Tampa Bay Buccaneer this year going up against two brand new coordinators in Cliff Kingsbury, who hasn't been in the NFL since 2021, and Joe Witt Jr., who's been obviously on Dan Quinn's staff, but new personnel that he's going to be coaching. We're not sure exactly how he's going to use it. And ultimately, he's never been the play caller before. How would you be preparing this week?
Yeah, so what I do is because again, like Tampa Bay's run a new offense also. They got a new offensive coordinator. I think his name's Liam Cohen. And, so they're kind of saying like, well, what do we do versus Joe Witt Jr.? So what I did last year, or what I did last night, is I went and I looked at the LA Rams, because that's the last place that Liam Cohen worked in the NFL in 2022. He was at Kentucky prior to that, played the Dallas Cowboys, where Joe Witt Jr. was. And so that's kind of that's the initial starting point. It's like, where was the coordinator last? Where was I last? And then let's go from there. Because again, that gives you kind of a general idea. But again, like Liam Cohen's going to change what he does. Joe Witt Jr., after watching what they did last year versus LA, is going to change what he does. And then you kind of get into like, I know what you know what I know, and then you try to anticipate what they're going to do moving off of that. Like, obviously the basic structures are going to be somewhat the same, but they're going to evolve. All defenses in the offseason tend to add a wrinkle. All offenses tend to add a wrinkle. So what's that going to be coming into week one, and how do we kind of prepare for those unscouted looks? So, if I'm a defensive coordinator, I think I'd probably want to keep it relatively simple, so that if we did get an unscouted look, the guys would have answers and be able to get us in the right look. And obviously my third down packages are going to be what those are, which are going to be more complicated. But on first and second down, I want to make sure the guys can play fast and understand the assignment. Because, we could get formations, we could get personnel groupings we're not ready for. We don't need to be like, hey, we only run cover 6 a couple times. Like, what's our check to this? Like, no, let's make sure cover 3, Tampa 2, man coverage. Let's let it rip. So I think so that's essentially my process, is go back, look at the coordinator from their last stop, try to figure out what applies to us in this offense and or defense, and then kind of go from there. Because again, the skeleton's going to be relatively the same. It's like the add-ons, the bows, the ribbons, all that stuff that you put on that makes it a little bit challenging to kind of anticipate some of the stuff they're going to do.
So I'm glad you mentioned that stuff at the end in terms of the game planning, the bows, the ribbons, because we talk about this all the time, and I feel like we should probably explain a little bit more in depth what that actually means, right? Because I think the average person, I got an email last week saying like, hey, you guys sometimes say stuff. Can you explain it a little bit more?
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? We can probably do better on that. That's our mission for the season, is to make sure that we're explaining everything so that nobody gets lost along the way. But when you talk about game planning, because in the preseason, you don't game plan. Now it's week one, you are game planning. Let's go offense first. If you're an OC, if you're Cliff, what does it mean to game plan something for the week compared to how you might go into a preseason game?
So when you're game planning, what you're going to do is you're going to look at what the defense does on first and second down. And so let's just take Tampa Bay as an example, because I just watched them. Like, they're a 3-4, so 3 defensive linemen, 4 linebacker base defense. So there's certain runs you're going to run versus a 3-4 that you wouldn't necessarily run or you don't like as much versus a 4 down. So that's like the easiest way to kind of start, right? On third and medium, so let me backtrack. So when did they bring pressure? Third medium, like where's that line start for the coordinator? Some people it's 3rd and 7, some people it's 3rd and 8, some people it's 3rd and 5. Where's that line for us? What's our protection install, right? What protections do we like versus the pressures they have shown? And if we don't like our protections, how do we modify them to make sure they pick this stuff up? And then what are our route concepts to beat the coverage shells that they're showing? And again, there's going to be a lot of transfer because a lot of defenses now, they run cover 6, they run cover 4, they run cover 2. So there's going to be some carryover, but how does this team run it that's maybe a little bit different? How can we take advantage of them? Like maybe they get super simple when we're in 3-by-1. Some teams do that. They get in like very simple coverage structures. So can we spend more time in 3-by-1, especially for our young quarterback? It's just basically game planning, I think, is just kind of taking what the defense does, fleshing it out more as much as you can. Like, for example, like Todd Bowles likes to bring a little bit of pressure on first down, like run stopping pressures. So let's make sure we have a plan for that. He likes to bring a ton of pressure on third and whatever. Let's make sure we have a plan for that. They like to play like these soft zone shells or man-to-man coverage behind it. What's our plan for that? So in the preseason, you don't really do any of that. It's just like these are the plays that are in. This is where we're going to run. Everybody have a great time. Here we're trying to maximize, I don't want to say each opportunity, but we're trying to put the guys in the best position to be successful more often than not. And I think that's where like the game planning element comes in.
Yeah, for sure. That's 80-90% of it. And then the last part would be personnel wise too, right? Mm-hmm. Is if, the other team has a corner who's not very good and you want to pick on them, you pick your spots to maybe move your number, and they always play on the left. Well, let's pick our spots to either always put our number one receiver over there and make them adjust to something they don't want to do, or pick our spots and, not let them make some kind of other adjustment where they have their best corner shadow our best guy. And now all of a sudden on a big second and short shot situation, let's get our guy all of a sudden over there. And we've got a matchup we like on a shot play. And like, that's how we generate an explosive. So you can do stuff like that. But I think I picked that example, Logan, specifically because you also don't want to get out of what you do. And I think that's something that's interesting about Cliff Kingsbury's offense that we'll kind of be tracking this year is he doesn't really switch players around personnel wise, and aka like Terry's always going to line up on one side of the field. That is generally how Cliff has done it. There hasn't been a ton of motion. There's been a little bit more, I think, later in his time in Arizona, and we'll see if they wind up doing some of that. And like wide receiver motion, right? But some of the tight end motions that have become in vogue in the league in terms of motioning to block, like he started to use some of that stuff. And so I think that's going to be something that's interesting and it's specific, big picture to game planning. It's taking advantage of their structure, their shape, their scheme, and their personnel within the context of what you do, not being like, this is what they don't do well. This is the stuff that beats it. Let me reinvent my whole offense for the week to try to beat them.
And there are offenses that do that where they're like, hey, like this run was really effective against them last week. Let's put that run in this week and see if we can run it. The problem is like when you don't major in that run, like you don't know all the adjustments. So like you're expecting a certain front, right? You're expecting a certain spacing by the defensive line. And if they don't present that spacing, then you don't know how to block it. And then you're going to have a negative run. So there is an advantage to kind of saying like, again, this is where it becomes a little bit challenging. Like this is our offensive identity. This is who we are offensively. Like Kyle Shanahan's really easy. Like we're going to run the football, we're going to run play action pass, we're going to run some keepers, and we're going to find our shot plays. But within the context of that philosophy, we're going to kind of tweak and move guys around to find opportunities. And I think you said, 80-90% of the game plan is that. And then, the 10% or 20% is personnel. I think the personnel is also just extremely important. Like I remember, especially going against a guy like Aaron Donald, like being in the game plan meeting and like that was the thing. Like,
right. Maybe that number changes dramatically if there's that guy on the other side.
Yeah, but like that, like what I'm saying is like that dude's like or Myles Garrett, like whoever that is, like this dude is a problem. Like we had a game when I was in Chicago, we were playing Indianapolis, and we were like, we're gonna run away from number 93. We don't think we can run at him, and that was the whole That was the cornerstone of the run game install, because we felt like the matchup was better to the other side, which is totally fine. So it's just personnel is a huge part. Finding those matchups is important. Who can win their one-on-ones, like you're saying. That's all that all goes into game plan, as opposed to in the preseason where it's like just line up out wide, let it rip. And I think like when people say, oh, like Cliff's offense looked simple. Yeah, because it's like literally day one and day two install with no game planning. Now, like we've talked about this before, like you can run a day one play, but with like making it for a game plan works. So like a great example of this is like Kyle used to run a play called Omaha, which is all outs. It's so if you were in full splits 2x2, it would almost look like hitches on the outside and then outs by the tight end or the slot receiver, right? So visualize that. And then for the game plan week, we'd get in a bunch and we'd motion to it. And then we'd have like a different stem for the route combinations, because versus bunches, they played off cover. They played this off corner and you can easily run it out. So that's like an example of taking a play that's really simple and then just put a little bit of window dressing on it. And it's still simple for us because it's day one install, but because of the motion, because of the formation change, we've maximized that play versus whatever defense we're playing. And that's all you're trying to do is just maximize opportunities versus them and find matchups.
And to dot the I, cross the T there, you might do that because against a bunch, they're going to play this coverage. And so much of football is like, if I know what you're going to do, I can beat it. The problem is I don't know what you're going to do. And so if you can, by formation, by personnel grouping, by whatever, unlock what the other side is going to do, mostly in offense, unlocking what a defense is going to do, well, then it's a lot easier to call plays. It's a lot easier to win. It's a lot easier to know exactly where you need to be because you actually know where the hole is. You know where the weakness is. So hopefully that we've explained game planning and why that's so important on a good level. But again, week one, it's hard because we think we have an idea based off previous coordinators, previous whatever, of what they're going to do. And a guy like Todd Bowles defensively, he's been around for a long time. But they always are making changes. They're always tweaking something. They're always shifting things to their own personnel. Maybe they used to like this blitz because he used to have Devin White, one of the best blitzing linebackers. He's been gone for a couple of years. So now I want to blitz my safeties instead. I still want to blitz in these situations, but where it's coming from is a little bit different. So those are the things that are hard to know week one. Anything else week one before we scope out to the rest of what we got on the show today, Logan?
Week one, I think it's just, to me, I used to hate week one so you're talking about Tampa Bay. I used to hate playing as a player. Like one of the most stressful things was playing against somebody you didn't have any looks for. So I think, like everyone's talked about, the Commanders are playing stuff close to the vest. I think that's a huge competitive advantage going into this game. Because Todd Bowles, he does game plan pressures. So, like, how do I game plan my pressures if I don't know what you're going to be in? If I don't know what personnel you're going to be in? If I don't know where the back's going to line up? Like, all that stuff becomes super important. So I think it's a great advantage, and I can't wait to see the game and kind of see, again, the offense and the defense blossom. Because, Joe Wood Jr. said we've been playing stuff close to the vest too. So what are the wrinkles they're bringing? So lots of really exciting challenges for Tampa Bay that's presented by the novelty of what Washington's done in the preseason or not shown, I guess. So.
Yeah, for sure. And of course, we will go into the game plan, quote unquote, whatever we think it's going to be, give you the full preview for Tampa on the late week podcast. And then we will talk about the specifics then. But for now, and of course, I should say a week from now, we'll be reviewing the Tampa game. So that's kind of going to be the rhythm of our week. We'll do an instant reaction show of some kind. We're still working out all the details of our schedule, our game plan for the season. But of course, we'll be back to 3 pods a week starting next week as we are into the season. Coming up in just a few minutes, if you want to do your own game planning, Bill Smith, who is the NFL's Director of Research, is going to join me to give a preview of NFL Pro, which is their kind of remix, if you will, Logan, of NFL Game Pass. Now you can sort and kind of go through film the way teams do, which makes watching film a lot better. So Bill's going to give us a demo coming up a little bit here on the show. So very much looking forward to that. But Logan, let's scope out now beyond the game plans to the full season, biggest of pictures. We've made it through the off season. We've had all these storylines. We've seen guys develop, young players. We've seen some position battles play out. We've seen some big trades with Jahan Dotson going to Philly. like, how are you feeling generally? Now, let's get on the football therapy couch. How are we feeling going into the 2024 season for the Commanders?
I mean, I'm excited, and if I said I wasn't, I'd be lying. I think the analyst in me, or the logical person in me, is like, don't be too excited. Everything's gonna be fine. Like, take it one step at a time. And there's some truth to that. But also, like, I'm a fan. I'm excited to watch football. I'm excited to see this team play. I'm excited to see Jaden Daniels on the field. I'm excited to see Joe Witt Jr. execute his defense. Like, all those things, I'm really looking forward to seeing. I think the offseason's gone about as well as it could have gone. I think when you look at the hiring of Dan Quinn, Adam Peters, and everything that this organization has done, everything they're doing around the practice facility, everything they're doing at the stadium to kind of make it a better experience for the fans, to make it a better experience for the players. I mean, it's all trending in the right way with a ownership group that wants to create a winner. And this is the first step, the first year of that. So that's all exciting stuff. I think it's also good to kind of put a little bit of a modifier on it, at least mentally, right? Like, this team, while I love all the process, still needs an enrichment of talent to a certain extent. And that's not to besmirch or be critical of the guys that are here. It's just like when you look around at like the San Francisco 49ers, the Detroit Lions, like the Philadelphia Eagles, like they have a certain roster construction that allows them to be competitive. And as much as you want to talk, or I want to talk about coaching and X's and O's, like, you need good football players, and getting more depth here is going to be extremely important. And that can't happen now. So I guess going into the season, like, that's my understanding, that's my expectation, is like, I'm excited to see all these things play out, knowing full well that next offseason is critical, and probably the offseason after that is critical as well.
No, I think that's totally fair. I am cautiously optimistic, but I am very, very cautious because I do see a path for them to win 9-10 games if Jaden Daniels is awesome and some other things play out. But I realistically think they're probably more in the, let's call it 6 to 8, probably 7 or 8 wins. If I had to, like, 7.5 is probably the number that I would give. I think 6.5 is what it's been in Vegas. So I'd probably go over on that, but like, if it's 7.5, I'm like really, really squeezed on it. But that's the NFL, right? Like, the league is designed to be an 8-8 or now a 9-8, 8-9 type of league. And a couple teams are able to way overshoot that. A couple teams get burned by injuries and it's way under. And, the Commanders are in an interesting place because they're actually not kind of built in the way that the league is designed, because they're at the start of an intentional rebuild. But with that being said, that talent dearth is, I think, especially at the top. Like, I actually really love their depth. And I think that really came up a lot when we were talking about putting together the 53. Like, it was hard because some of those back end guys are good football players. And like, for all the talk every single year of like, oh, you can't let that guy go, he's going to get signed to someone else's 53. And then it never happens. They had 2 guys that got signed to a 53 elsewhere, and a third guy that they traded. So that's 3 guys that other teams were like, yeah, we want that Washington Commander on our 53 that you don't have room for. That's great. But I was listening to a preview the other day, and it's like, how many blue chip players are on this roster? You could argue it's 0. Now, I think John, Duran, Terry all have chances to shoot back up. I think Luvu's got a chance to shoot back up, or to shoot up into that blue chip type of category, depending on how some things go. Obviously, Jaden, you'd hope eventually is a blue chip guy, but he's a rookie, and the chances he's going to play like a blue chipper this year just aren't very high based off the history of rookie quarterbacks in the NFL. But that's it. It's optimistic because I think we like a lot of what we've seen. Cautious because we're just realistic about where the guys on this roster have been recently, whether that is not performing to all pro type levels, or in college for some of the guys that are going to be the best players on this team very soon. Not only Jaden, but a Mike Sainer still, etc. So that does beg a question, Logan. If they're going to hit their ceiling, if they're going to have the bottom fall out, what does each one look like? So let's start off with actually, this is not as much fun, but let's end on a high note. So if it falls apart this year, if they're closer to that like 4 to 6 win range, because it's like, oh, it's year 1 of a rebuild, and man, we were not as far along as we thought. Call it a Washington Wizards, because that's what happened to them last year. Then what does that look like?
Yeah, so I think if just right now, and obviously like this is going to change as the season goes on, but I think what I would be skeptical of is like, one of the issues is is how does the protection hold up over the course of the season? If the offensive line struggles, if Cliff doesn't have an innovative plan, if there's not a nuanced protection plan each week to maximize that offensive line in conjunction with a game plan, and that group ends up struggling a little bit, I'm not sure there's the horsepower on the outside that you can compensate for. Like, for example, Cincinnati in 2022, when they draft Jamar Chase, like their offensive line's kind of mediocre, but Jamar Chase is able to win so quickly. They're able to push the football down the field. They're able to find explosive plays. I'm not sure there's that same type of horsepower here outside. So if the protection doesn't go and the offensive line kind of underperforms, I definitely think that's something that could kind of torpedo this season and put them in a bad spot. It could stunt Jaden Daniels' development and just put the team generally in a bad spot. And then kind of piggybacking off of that, if the offensive line's fine, and Jaden has a little bit of a struggle early on, which is totally understandable. He's a rookie player, like those things happen. Then that's going to kind of set that back. And obviously they're not going to win games they should win if the quarterback's struggling, which is, again, it's entirely plausible that does happen, and it's entirely reasonable. Like, he's a young player. How many times have we seen young players struggle, but kind of over the course of the season develop and become something that is the franchise, looks like the franchise guy. So I think both those things are things offensively that could torpedo them. And then defensively, I think the one thing that I've circled is, can they consistently game plan and scheme up a pass rush?
Yes.
I think we know what the coverage situation is. It's less than ideal, but we're always kind of banking on, Dan Quinn, Joe Wood Jr., and what they did in Dallas and their ability to maximize rush opportunities for guys. That's hard to do week in and week out. It's just challenging. Much like the protection thing and insulating an offensive line, that's just hard. It's hard as a coordinator. There are certain times the matchups aren't favorable. It's the same thing with the defensive line, the blitz packages, and that front, let's just say the front in general, creating pressure. And so I know I have a lot of faith in Joe Wood Jr., but I also understand and empathize with how challenging that can and is going to be. So those are the two things that I would kind of circle and be like, offensive line, quarterback offensively, and then just the front. And can we generate enough pressure to insulate the back end? Because that's always been one of my assumptions, is that group will play better because the pressure will be better. But that's not necessarily true, because that's a big lift for Joe Wood Jr.
Yeah, realistically, there's a lot of what ifs on the defense, and if some of those go poorly, it could get sideways this season. And I don't think it'll look like it did last year, right? Like, I don't think it's going to be a bunch of coverage busts and there's never any pressure, and like I don't think it's going to be that bad. But you are relying on Quan Martin to kind of make a position switch. He was playing nickel. He's got to be able to convert. You're kind of relying on Frankie Luvu to make a position switch, where he goes from pure off-ball linebacker who's an excellent blitzer to, hey, we're going to rely on you in passing situations to be an edge. And that is a different deal, and I think he's up to it. But you're hoping that switch goes well. Obviously, Jamin, to a lesser extent, being relied upon, but you're asking him to make the same switch. And if he, as we'll talk about in the ceiling, if some of these things go right, then holy crap, like this could be awesome.
I mean, shoot, if you want to go, like, Jeremy Chin, career resurgence, Quan Martin, position change,
right.
Manuel Forbes figuring out, Benjamin St. Juste learning into defense, Mike Sanders
the entire secondary
nickel.
Is a bunch of what ifs.
And then defensive line is very similar. Can Duran and John bounce back? Is Dorrance Armstrong ready for a full-time role? Like Cleveland Farrell, can he be that? That's what you're looking at here. And so obviously that could go well, or it could not go well. It could go well for some of them and not well. You know what I'm saying? Like and
that's the most realistic, expectation, right? Like if we don't go to the extremes of, hey, how does it completely fall apart? How does it go as well as it possibly could? The realistic thing is that some of these are going to work. Let's say Forbes is great, St. Juste doesn't quite catch on, or the other way around. Yeah. Or like the position switch works for Quan, but Chin sustains another injury, because that's been his life since he became in second to Chase Young in Rookie of the Year in 2020. Like, that is probably the most realistic thing, that like maybe Luvu, it works out, and Dorrance Armstrong we discover is best as an actual third guy, not as a primary number one starting edge. Like, that is.
I mean, we hope it's the other way, but again, like these are entirely plausible scenarios.
Right, but I'm saying that like some of them work, some of them don't, is probably the thing. And I think taking a bigger picture look at this, like my kind of motif for the season, if you will, is like it's a season of discovery. It's a season to figure out, like, part of the reason that they don't go sign Gilmore or make some of the other moves that fans wanted them to, that probably would have helped their team in the very short term, is because you need to find out if Emmanuel Forbes is good. You need to find out if Benjamin St. Juste can play for you. You need to figure this stuff out. And if the reps aren't available, then you can't figure it out. And so ultimately, like the whole thing for this season is let's figure out exactly who these guys are. And then next offseason, like you said, it's such a huge offseason to supplement, especially on the defensive side of the football, and invest in the places that you need to, because now you understand what you do and don't have on your roster.
Yeah, and I think that same thing applies to the offense. And I know people are, Jaden Daniels, like, as confident as we are in him after what we've seen in preseason, it's still a question. He's still a rookie player. Offensive line, right? Does Wiley flourish in this offense? I think Cosme will be fine, but new center, new left guard, probably a rookie left tackle at some point this year. Terry, we know Terry, how consistent he's been, but Zach Ertz's health, over the course of the season, he hasn't been healthy for 2 seasons, and as well as he's done, and as much as they're relying on him, that's going to be a huge deal. And then how do they kind of allocate the second, third, fourth receiver to maximize this offense? I think the way you characterize it with this is a year of discovery is huge, because you got to kind of figure out what your foundation is. And some of these questions are going to be answered in the negative, which is terrible, which is tough, but some of them are going to be awesome. And you're going to be like, wow, look at B-Rob, look how well he did in this offense. We can build around this piece, and we do need to find a second wide receiver, or we do need to find a younger pass catching tight, whatever it looks like. But I think that's the best way to think about it. A year of discovery. And again, if Jaden Daniels plays well, you could easily win 8-9 games. But if all of these factors around him, if he struggles, it could be kind of a middling year, which is also totally understandable given the current situation with the roster. And I'm glad you pointed out, in terms of blue chip guys, there's not a lot of them on this team, right? So usually you need a couple of those to make sure you're making a push against some of the better teams in the NFL. So lots of questions, and I think they're all very reasonable.
For sure. And if we want to now flip to kind of the positive, how do we see them hit their ceiling? It's a lot of those get answered in the affirmative. And I think to even put a finer point on it, this is the year we discover whether it's a 1, 2, or 3 year rebuild. If all of a sudden De'Ami Brown's good in this offense and you're like, whoa, okay, 3rd round pick, took him a couple years. That sometimes happens, but he's a legit 2. Okay, well now it's a party. Let's go spend some money in free agency next year on one more weapon and some defensive guys, or you figure out which of the answers come to the negative, and you're doing a Houston. You're competing in year 2 of a rookie quarterback, which is amazing because that's a bunch of years on a rookie quarterback timeline that you have to spend money elsewhere. Obviously, if it goes the other way and you're like, okay, maybe we're going to need to restock the cupboard over the course of a couple years before we're legitimately competing, then that's a different story. But for the ceiling side of it, Logan, I think obviously number one is Jaden is actually a deliver no assembly required quarterback, that there is stuff he can do, and of course he'll have room to grow, but there is enough stuff that he can do right now that they can compete week in, week out. He doesn't turn the football over as much as a lot of rookies do. He's able to use his legs to generate some explosives. Obviously, he's hitting some deep balls, and he and Cliff just have a good synergy. I think another one for ceiling is Cliff makes the evolution late in season that he needs to, that has kind of plagued him in his career. That there's not a wall at the end of the season. And then I think the pass rush is huge, because I think if the pass rush is there defensively, they find ways to generate pressure, then the coverage will hold up enough. And I think guys like Sanderson and Forbes can kind of go to their instincts and create some turnovers. If not, then we talked about what that looks like. But to me, those are the biggest factors are Cliff's ability to scheme it up and how that works with Jaden's skill set and Jaden's ability to execute, and then the pass rush defensively. If those 3 things are on, then let's have a season.
No, I'm totally with you. I think, again, Jaden Daniels is the easiest one to point out, but, Brandon Coleman at left tackle, is another one that I would kind of circle too. If he develops in a similar way, that'd be awesome. And then defensively, we talked about, the pass rush, and does the scheming and some of the pressure packages they put in camp that no one's seen yet, do those hit the way they think they're going to hit, and do they cause enough disruption? And, again, it's kind of the same thing we just said in reverse, but I do think there's a world where that does happen, and this defense plays significantly better, and the offense is significantly better, and everything kind of progresses well, and with hiccups along the way, no doubt. It's not going to be 17 games, just win them all kind of straight out, but I think understanding that there's going to be positives and negatives, but if it's generally trending in the right direction, I think you feel really, really good about this, and really good about the direction of the organization.
No doubt about it. And I think that, again, Coleman's a perfect example of what I was talking about with the 1, 2, or 3 year rebuild. Like if he's not up to starting caliber at left tackle, you need to use a high resource on left tackle probably next year. If he is the starter at left tackle, well, that means you can use a high resource on something else. We're talking like your first round pick on something else next year. And like, that's a huge luxury to be like, okay, we got our starting quarterback and starting left tackle in one draft. And so those are the kinds of things that in the long term, I think are huge for this team in terms of the rebuild. And, that's why Adam Peters is getting paid all that money is to get that stuff right. And he's obviously revamped the scouting process. So you'd hope that it's even better in year 2, even though I think a lot of us look at it as being fairly successful in year 1. Anything else before we get to the interview with Bill, Logan, that we wanted to tack on here?
No, I'm just really excited. I'm really excited to see, like, this is why the season's going to be fun to watch. It is for these positive and negative, kind of growing or maybe that's the wrong way to put it. To see what this team is, I think is what I'm most excited for. And that all starts versus Tampa Bay. So I really can't wait to kind of see all of this offseason conversation, all the draft, all the free agent acquisitions, like on the field, playing football against a team that's pretty solid in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, no, for sure. All right, coming up next, brand new season for the NFL, and they have redone what was formerly known as NFL Game Pass into NFL Pro, which is going to let you watch film like a pro, at least kind of. Logan, perhaps we need to do a tutorial on what to actually watch now that we can sort all the film and kind of get it organized, but what to actually watch for. But we can ask Bill Smith about this as well. He's the NFL Director of Research and Analytics, and I'm going to talk to him about what they've done with NFL Pro and their All-22 platform next here on Take Command. Joining us now is the NFL's Director of Research and Analytics. And that is a big title, and he does a lot of really cool stuff. It's Bill Smith. And Bill, a lot more of that cool stuff is going to be accessible to all of us this year, as there is a whole new, you guys aren't even calling it Game Pass anymore. It's NFL Plus. NFL Pro is the extension of the NFL Plus, where you guys are now allowing sorting and searching and all kinds of cool stuff, all kinds of integration to the All-22 game film and a lot of the next-gen stats and features. I've probably just done a terrible job butchering, Bill, all of the cool stuff that you do. It's just so much stuff. It's hard to encapsulate. So first of all, thanks for your time and welcome to the show. And 2, I would say, do you want to do a better job of what I just did of kind of explaining some of the new stuff here? And then we're actually going to give folks that are watching, as opposed to listening to this, a demo of what you guys have built. So again, welcome. And how would you try to summarize what you guys tried to do with this new project?
No, thanks, Craig. Appreciate you having me. I think you did a pretty good job. So what we've done with the Next Gen Stats specifically platform is it's been something that's been internal facing that we've had access to since 2016. We've really been ramping it up, trying to add as many cool stats and data points as we can to contextualize the game, to really get fans more in-depth knowledge of what's exactly playing out on the field. And we've been working over the past year or so to really try to get fans a better offering so they can engage with the data. So as you mentioned, we released NFL Pro as part of the NFL Plus Premium subscription for this season. NFL Pro really productizes a lot of the great next-gen stats and other data that the NFL holds. And then what we really wanted to do is we really wanted to tie everything to the All-22, to the coaches' film, so that you can see just the power of the data and that you can see the validity of the data, so that you can not just say, like, hey, here's this number and this stat, like, what does it really mean? Well, we tied all the plays that fall underneath specific filters and queries, so you can watch just that subset of playlists. You can search all 22 and watch all of a quarterback's third and long attempts, all those attempts against the blitz, to really hone in and be more efficient on how you're watching film, to be able to give fans really a best in class experience.
So this is something that teams through a variety of platforms have had access to for a long time. I always just kind of wondered that the more that the league has extended the ability to watch the All-22, especially to media, and then certainly to fans as well, whether you just kind of go in some of those platforms and hey, let's add a 33rd team that there's no access to practice footage, and let's just try to do that. Why ultimately did you guys go the route you did, building something new that is more integrated into the familiar place that fans and media have been finding All-22 film and the next-gen stats for years?
We really just wanted to democratize access to the data in the film. There shouldn't be a barrier to entry, whether it's from a media side, whether it's wanting to break into coaching, scouting, whatever that may be. Having access to do your own research, to get yourself more familiar with the game, to learn more about the games. Like that's what we want for fans, for media. That's what we want for everyone throughout the football ecosystem. Like everyone getting more access to data, more access to the video only brings the level of intelligence of everyone up. It only brings the level of awareness of everyone up. And it just really like lets people a little bit more on the inside. It helps them, as we call it NFL Pro. It helps you like be more of a pro with your fandom, with your, content on the media side. We really just want to, give everyone the ability to access all the great data that we have access to.
No doubt. And I will say it will help this show a lot because, instead of us having to sort through, or like if I used to want to watch a team back and be like, all right, I want to watch the Commanders' next opponent and I want to watch just their offense, like I'd have to kind of scroll through. It was a little bit clunky, to be nice about it. Bill, I'm sure you have gotten a lot of feedback on that over the years from all angles. But now I can just sort through, and we'll give folks a demo of that in just a second. But one last question I have for you on the front end here, Bill, before we dive into the product itself is, data is only as good as folks' ability to use it. Every team across the league has basically the same data. Their ability to use that data, creates for them a competitive advantage or disadvantage if they're not using it well. When you think about fan-facing data and making sure that it gets that fans really understand what they're looking at, do you have either a good example or kind of an overall methodology that you think about in making sure that the data, now that it's all available, is used to really enhance fans' understanding of the game?
Yeah, absolutely. We tried to design the platform with a large spectrum of fans in mind. If you're a real diehard, avid, heavy data fan, you'll see when I give the demo of the product, we have statistical dashboards that you can dive into, do your own research, and pull out your own insights and findings. If you're a more casual fan and you want to sort of be led to water of like how we can utilize this data, my team each and every week is going through and doing research for, NFL Network, NFL Media. We're working with the game crews and providing some of what we think are the best insights that may lead and help determine the outcome of a game based on team tendencies, team performance, player performance, scheme. All of those are in here and they're sort of spoon-fed to you throughout the process. So if you're more casual, we can sort of elevate to what we think is the most important things each week. And if you're more avid and you want to do the research yourself, we've provided the mechanism for you to be able to do that.
Bill Smith, NFL Director of Research and Analytics, now going to show us this fancy new product. And I will describe for everyone who's listening to this on the radio or catches this on the on-demand and podcast form, kind of what is on the screen to the best that I can. But of course, if you want to check out with the visual, Bill and the folks at the NFL have given us the green light to be able to actually show you all 22 tape at the Team 980 and at Craig Hoffman on YouTube. So, Bill, I'm going to go ahead and pull up this shared screen that you have, and you can take us where are you going to take us, because there's a stats platform, then there's kind of a film platform. So this from just on a baseline level looks like you have kind of the two sites that used to live in Game Pass on the film side, and then the next gen stats site are now all in one place. Is that fair to say? Absolutely.
So when we land you here on the homepage of NFL Pro, we sort of give you openings to the rabbit holes for each of the two main offerings in the product. You have the stats section, you have the film room. If you scroll down on the homepage, there are a few more things. We have some of those custom insights that I talked about for teams and players for each week going in. You scroll down. One of the things we really wanted to do is really explain what the next gen stats data is, what it's measuring, and why it's important for all of your football and fantasy decision making. So there's a lot of educational components throughout the product. You scroll down more, we have each matchup throughout the week. You can scroll through and click and get a little top line information on each one. Continue to scroll down. There's some high level stats and standings, but I'll go back up and I'll start with the stats page. So if you click into the
which, by the way, right now features Terry McLaurin as the featured image. Bill, I don't know if you did that just for us, but we're going to pretend that you did and say we appreciate it.
Hey, I'll take it. Any credit we can get, we'll take the positive feedback. So again, you scroll into season stats. It lands you on the passing page. We have stats pages for passing, rushing, receiving, and defense from an individual perspective, as well as team offense and team defense. Again, right at the top of the page, we have some sort of explainer content on some of the metrics. So you look at time to throw, it sort of tells you how we categorize them. what the NFL average is on a pass at about 2.75 seconds, and then some stats that are correlated and related to time to throw. So if you think about quarterback pressure, that's related on time to throw. The longer the quarterback holds onto a pass, the more likely he is to be pressured. And then air yards per attempt, the longer the quarterback holds on to the ball, the more likely it is for him to throw the ball further downfield. So just some of that more educational content to sort of show fans what they're going to see below. If you scroll down in passing, it's just like any other stats table you've seen. For this, I want to go into the rushing though and look at some Commanders stuff in general. You go into the rushing stats, you scroll down, you have the stats table. For any,
right. And there's both basic and advanced stats here. Just for the folks listening, you have yards and yards from scrimmage, rushing yards, whatever version this looks like. Did McCaffrey really have 1,400 rushing yards last year?
He did. He had almost 300 more rushing yards than anyone else in the league.
God, I didn't realize that. That's why I said for a second, I was like, that yards from scrimmage? No, Christian McCaffrey actually had 1,459 yards rushing last year. It helps when he averages 5.4 a carry. But you also have things like rush EPA, and you have a lot more advanced stats down here as well. And I think what's really cool, Bill, on this right side of the chart here, the table, is you also have some, how many times did he get into a rush where he breaks 15 or 20 miles an hour? So you talk about the explosive ability and like when do these guys really get into the third level and get to open it up. You get to see how often that happens. So that's really cool. And on the next gen side of it as well.
Absolutely. So if you go through here, you can then utilize some of the next gen stats splits to see how different running backs are faring in different situations. So if you open up the splits, you can look at inside or outside the tackles, how they're doing versus how many defenders are in the box, whether the quarterback's in shotgun, under center, or pistol, where they are, if it's red zone or goal to go, like big upside there for fantasy usage. So if we click into light box, so from a Commander's perspective, maybe didn't see as many light boxes as other teams in the league last season. Now with a rushing quarterback in Jaden Daniels, Cliff Kingsbury wanting to open up the offense a little bit, maybe you see more light boxes. So if you sort the rushing by the rushing yards over expected, which is a next gen stats metric that tries to isolate the running back's contribution indifferent of the offensive line and a lot of the scheme, you can see that, Brian Robinson was 15th in the league last season. And even though he may have only averaged 4.5 yards per carry against the light box, and that might not be one of the highest in the league, you can see that he gained 40 yards over what he was expected to gain on those particular rushes last season. The really, really cool thing about this, all these statistical dashboards and everything within NFL Pro, you see if you're watching a lot of gold numbers on the stats dashboards, any number that is gold is a link. So Brian Robinson had 93 rush attempts against the light box last season. I can click that 93
and then I can go watch them.
It automatically
that's
curates
money,
that
Bill.
playlist.
That's great stuff, Bill. That's what we're talking about.
So it goes in and it plays those 93 plays. We have all the metadata on the play. So time, quarter, down distance, field position, the 22 players who are on the field, and it just runs sideline, end zone all the way through. So in addition, we have filters on the left-hand side of the page here. So if you want to see, rushing and you only want to see, maybe they're going to look to run outside the tackles more often this season, you can select outside the tackles. It goes from 93 plays to 44 plays. Within here, the URL for someone like yourself doing content is customized to the exact playlist you have. If you share this out on social media, your followers can click in directly through this link and they'll land on the same 44 plays. So they can watch exactly what you're watching as someone who's doing the research on the Commanders week in and week out. These playlists are also savable here at the bottom. So if you want to set a 2024 playlist for Brian Robinson rushing outside the tackles against the light box, you can come back each and every week and it'll already be populated with plays from that last week's game as you continue throughout the season. So it's really cool. It's really powerful how the stats and the film work together.
So let me ask you on the kind of the your end of it. What kind of team do you have working on this, and how fast are you guys able to turn this around, considering how in depth this is?
So we have a decent sized team of 8 to 10 people working to get custom curated insights for every game each season throughout the week. And hold on, I can pull up the Commanders game for this week. If you go to the game page, you'll see on the matchup insights that we have things specifically curated for each game. And then the data and film, I do want to call out, are available at 6 a.m. Eastern the day following the game. So it's not updating live. It's not there directly after the game, but it is in first thing the next morning. It's the same schedule that the teams get access to the data and the all 22 from the league. So we're really democratizing it for the fan and really want to give everyone access to the same data and film that coaches, front office members, and players are privy to.
That's huge, because that has been, I'm sure you're well aware of, one of the issues, let's call it, with Game Pass in the past is it's kind of a mystery box of when exactly it would pop up. And most of the time it would be there by like noon on Tuesday, but sometimes your game didn't quite pop up. But to know that it's a part of that same system that teams are getting, feels like it's going to be super reliable, which is great. Really excited. Bill Smith is with us here. He is the NFL's Director of Research and Analytics. All right, Bill, we got time for maybe one more trick if you got time, if there's anything else that you want to show us on this site.
Absolutely. So as we I've talked about with my team going through and creating these custom insights each week, the first place that we start for where we go down the rabbit hole is here at what we've created on each game page. We're calling the matchup comparison tool. So we've taken each team and how they're doing in a specific subset of our next gen stats data and rank them based on EPA per play, total EPA, and success rate, and then have them on a rolling average to rank teams in certain categories such as passing under pressure or on play action, against the blitz, deep passing. And we then are able to create an advantage for teams going into certain games. I will say for the Commanders specifically, going into week one, this is based on 2023 data. New coaching staff, new quarterback. I would say this isn't as relevant for this specific game as it is with two teams who have consistent coach quarterback. But we have this available. So if you want to start your research each week with, hey, here's a place where, the Commanders may have an advantage over their opponent, or here's a place where I think one of my fantasy players will have a big game. Like, we give this to you, and then you can go and do your own research further down the rabbit hole. It's a really powerful tool. It's a really cool way to start your research process each week. And we're just really excited to get it in the hands of fans throughout the country.
No doubt. When you say a rolling average, obviously this year, or for week one, it's based off last year, but like, by week 4, let's say this year, will that just be the first 4 weeks? Will it be like 3 weeks at a time? How is that going to evolve throughout the season to try to capture current form?
So it'll be a rolling average with just looking at 2024. So again, rolling into weeks 2 and 3, the sample sizes are going to be small, but as we continue to go throughout the season and get more data on teams, it'll become more and more powerful. Really, just as a quick one, if you go into the kickoff game and look and click on the matchups for the Chiefs and the Ravens, one that always sticks out to us is the Ravens play action pass offense, ranked first in the league last season. Lamar Jackson averaged almost 11 yards per attempt on play action. And that's a place the Chiefs defense struggled last season. So again, Baltimore adds Derrick Henry. The Chiefs lose L'Jarius Sneed this offseason. We see that as an advantage for Baltimore. Maybe that's somewhere that they lean in this kickoff game to try to pull off the upset in Kansas City.
This is awesome stuff. And I've gotten a glimpse of some of this over the years with some of the people that I've worked with. And when I was a beat reporter, and occasionally a player would pull out their iPad and show me something, and the way they could navigate it. And I love that word that you've used, to democratize this for fans everywhere. It's really tremendous stuff. So first of all, thank you. Second of all, thank you for your time here on the show, and best of luck with everything that you're doing. This is awesome stuff, Bill, and we really appreciate you sharing it with us.
Absolutely. Again, NFL Pro is available as part of NFL Plus Premium. It's a really awesome product. We're really proud of it, and any feedback you have, please let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bill, you're doing my job now, but just to make sure that we got all the copy points in, NFL Pro provides access to all 22 coaches, film, and next gen stats. It's available with an NFL Plus premium subscription at pro.nfl.com. And for more information on NFL Plus, visit nfl.com/plus. Bill Smith, everybody, NFL Director of Research and Analytics with us. That's it, and that's all for this edition of Take Command. Thanks so much for watching and or listening. Logan, next podcast, we get to preview an actual football game.
Yeah, can't wait, man. Really looking forward to that.
And so that'll be Thursday. We'll see you then here on Take Command. And by the way, subscribe. You thought I forgot. I didn't. Don't you either. Subscribe. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.